Would you want Gary Ridgway to be serving on your jury if you were charged with a crime? I am sure the answer is no, but if Democrats in Olympia have their way, that very much could be the case. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop, not even SNL, not even the Babylon Bee could write a headline as absurd as what's playing out in Olympia right now. I mean, we have reached well beyond parody levels when you talk about criminal justice reform and activism. You know, there have been bills throughout the years where I was like, okay, that's too far, but at least I understood the sentiment behind it. And then there is House Bill 2030, which is so absurd that I genuinely can't believe that we're sitting here and having this actual conversation. Now, House Bill 2030 is sponsored by Representative Tara Simmons, which will not come as a surprise. I mean, I could have told you what the bill was, and 99% of you would have said, I bet you Tara Simmons is a sponsor of this bill, because she used to be incarcerated, and so a lot of the bills that she puts forth have to do with making life easier for felons. Some of them are fine. I want people to get out of prison and to be able to lead a productive life. What I don't want is to reduce consequences so much that you're allowing anyone, as this bill would, incarcerated in the state of Washington to have their right back to vote and to be able to serve on a jury of your peers. And that is what would happen under House Bill 2030. There's at least one caveat, which we'll get to momentarily, but there was a committee hearing on this last week. Let's listen to what Representative Tara Simmons said. She spoke in front of the committee because it is her bill, so that's how it works. If you're a lawmaker and you're sponsoring a bill and it's before a particular committee, you're going to show up and you're going to pitch it. You're going to tell them why you think this bill is important. So here is Representative Simmons.
You know, here in America, we take away the right to vote, and it's very much rooted in racism and our, very shameful past with racism. And other countries don't take away your right to vote. The actual incarceration, and what I learned in Norway, is the way they believe is that people are in prison and that is the punishment. They get their punishment at the court and they are there to learn to be better neighbors. The reason why I think we take it away is because we believe that people that are incarcerated are bad people.
Correct.
And I think it's a moral issue. We not only incarcerate them, we take away the right to vote, we give them fines and fees, we don't really give them adequate health care, food, all of these other ways we punish people. And when you overpunish, people leave prison feeling low self-worth and are not productive. I think voting is one thing. There's no public safety risk in it. They're not going to use their ballot to commit a crime. They're not going to use their ballot to hold somebody up or anything like that.
I tried it. Undivided, Brandi. Undivided. Look, I understand the sentiment that we want to make sure the vast majority of people who are incarcerated in the state of Washington are going to get out someday. That's a fact. And you want to make sure that when they get out, they have gone through the necessary rehabilitation while behind bars so they don't do it again. That's a societal good. I 100% agree with that. But I disagree with the notion that when they commit a serious crime and they're put in prison, that we need to make life comfortable for them, that they should have all of the rights and the freedoms that they otherwise would have if they weren't incarcerated. That's ridiculous. It is supposed to be a punishment. And it is a punishment to have your right to vote taken away from you for a period of time until you prove that you can respect the rules of a civil society and of a free society. And when you're behind bars because you killed someone, for instance, you've taken away that person's right to vote forever. You've taken away their dignity and their self-worth when you're in prison for rape, when you're in prison for murder, when you're in prison for an armed robbery. And that's the conversation that people like Representative Tara Simmons are never willing to have, is to have a conversation about the things that were taken away from crime victims. You want to have a conversation about giving things back to criminals. And I also argue with the notion, and this is true for those of us who are free and who are not incarcerated, I disagree entirely with the notion that it's the government's job to give you self-worth, to give you self-determination, to give you a will to live. That's not the government's job, and God forbid we ever start to believe that that's the government's job. To make me believe that my life is worth living? That's not the job of the government. It's not the job of our prison system either. So there are a couple very clear issues with this bill. Not that I need to explain them to you, but I will. So Representative Greg Cheney, a Republican of Battleground, who was on the committee that was hearing this bill, had a legitimate line of questioning for Representative Tara Simmons about what this would mean for people who are on trial for crimes that a member of their jury under this bill might also have committed.
For vehicular homicide, for vehicular assault, they can all sit on a juror panel on a DUI charge, correct?
Well, I think that's the current case if people are in jail too.
If they are, no, you can be in jail. Follow up. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
You can be in jail, and I know you know this, you can be in jail on a misdemeanor. That is very different than being in a prison on a felony. If you are in prison on a felony for DUI assault, this bill would let you come into a misdemeanor court and sit on a DUI jury panel, correct?
I would say people in jail are there for felony DUIs and vehicular assaults as well, and they can currently vote. So yes, this would allow them, if they move to the prison, to vote as well.
Yeah, but typically when you look at the difference between jail time and prison time, usually you're in jail if your sentence is less than 364 days, and then you go to prison if it's more serious and if it's over a year. So to compare those things and to just look on paper and say, well, technically their crime is exactly the same, and so then if they're in jail or if they're in prison, it makes no difference. It does make a difference, because you could also have committed a crime that you're in jail for, that somebody's in jail for and the other person's in prison for, because the other person has a higher offender score, because they've committed a lot of other crimes before that has raised their offender score and has thus increased their sentence. And she knows that. Just like Representative Cheney said, she knows that because she's been in prison and because she has dedicated her life to looking at these sorts of issues. She is very aware of the differences that leave someone in jail versus leave someone in prison, and to sit there and act as if she does not know or to twist the truth is an absolute failure. And I'm glad that Representative Cheney called her out. But here is the piece de resistance. And this is what brings a bill like this from the level of just being another ridiculous attempt at activism as a legislator to being, I mean, again, to the level of parody that I just never even thought we would be here. Representative Sam Lowe had a very important follow-up question for Representative Tara Simmons.
I disagree with your premise of racism. When I heard this bill and read this bill, I thought of one person, Gary Ridgway, and I've thought of that person every day since I read this bill. I've not thought about any other prisoner other than Gary Ridgway. So would Gary Ridgway's rights be restored with this bill?
Yes, they would. And well, yeah, because he wasn't punished by death, right? Or he was, but it got commuted. So I think his right might be restored.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Peak insanity. Peak insanity. And credit to Sam Lowe for making her acknowledge it, sitting there on the record, on video. Yes, this bill would give one of the worst serial killers in American history the power and the right to vote. Or even worse yet, the right to sit on a jury and decide your fate. That's about as crazy as it gets. That's about as crazy a bill as I have ever seen in 15 years introduced in Olympia. But there's multiple sponsors on this bill. It's not just Representative Tara Simmons, who's out there pushing crazy pro-prisoner stuff on an island. Several of the bills of hers that we've talked about this legislative session have many other co-sponsors, Democrats, obviously. This one has Representative Gregerson, Bateman, Ormsby, Peterson, Mena, Street, and Dolio. So we can put the bulk of the blame on Representative Simmons for the kind of stuff that she comes up with. And she can say, well, you know, you can use Gary Ridgway as an extreme example. And there are a lot of people who aren't Gary Ridgway incarcerated in our prison system, and that's true, but there are a lot of people who killed someone, who have no right in the world being considered. And how would that even work? How would that, besides the utter stupidity of it and the extremism of it, how would that even work? Have you ever, I'm assuming, Tara Simmons, you have, sat through the jury selection process? Well, I have. And as a citizen, you are called to come to a courthouse. If it's a big trial, there's about 100 of you, and you sit there and you go through questioning. Can you imagine sitting there? You get your jury summons in the mail and you go into a courtroom. And then what? They bring Gary Ridgway in his orange jumpsuit and handcuffs and sit him next to you to answer questions from the prosecution to decide whether he's going to be on a jury. And then what if he's chosen, God forbid, which I don't actually think would happen. And then you're sitting in a box with 12 people. They're going to let Gary Ridgway sit next to you. They're going to let a murderer sit next to you, a rapist sit next to you. And they're going to keep him in handcuffs during someone else's trial? Probably not. So they're going to take the handcuffs off? Of course not. This doesn't even work in practice. These are the people who are in Olympia making the laws that you and I have to live by and that you and I have to live with the consequences of. I don't think I've ever seen a dumber, more dangerous bill in my life. Gosh, there's a new one every week that absolutely reaches that threshold. I asked subscribers in our daily show poll today because, again, I think there is some good conversations to have about how you set up an inmate to succeed on the outside after they're released from prison. I asked, do you think inmates should be able to vote and serve on a jury? And I gave you two options. Yes, but only non-violent offenders, or no. If you're in prison, no, you can't serve on a jury. I mean, not to mention that, again, I just don't know how that would be functional. Like, you're going to take them from the prison that they're in and bus them to the courthouse. I just don't make any sense. The vast majority of you are saying no, which is not a surprise. Carenza says, I would agree. It just seems that when you think you're giving them an inch, some scenario comes up that you would not agree with, but fits within the rules. Jackie says, when you break the law, you forfeit some of your rights. It's a consequence of breaking the law and being found guilty. If you don't want to lose those rights, then don't break the law. The most stupid bill I have ever heard of. And there are a lot of good contenders. Jackie and I were on the same wavelength. Kendrick says, I just have to ask, is this the most important thing they need to be worried about? This is really the highest priority. And that is such a good point, because this is a 60-day legislative session. It's a short session. And you think of all the other things that we have going on, and you're holding, and I'd also point out, there's a lot of bills that never get a hearing. There's a lot of bills that are sponsored, that go out and they get dropped and they never get a hearing. So not only was this bill created, which I think was mistake number one, but he was given a hearing.
Oh, and did you also catch...
Which is mistake number two.
Did you catch that they also got to go on a taxpayer-funded trip to Norway?
Did she actually go to Norway?
Yes.
To go to the prison system?
With other legislators.
Nicole, you love traveling. Maybe the key to being able to travel as part of your job and not even pay for it is just becoming a state lawmaker.
There we go.
There we go. Let me see here. Oh, that's funny. Travis Eberly wrote on Patreon, because the poll didn't have the name of the sponsor. He goes, let me guess. This is the handiwork of Tara Simmons. Yeah, hard pass, he says. And I will note, because Tara Simmons sort of referred to it, the only exception is someone who's sentenced to death. But remember, we don't give people the death penalty in this state anymore. So the only exception is not an exception at all.
Well, that's why Ridgeway can get in, because we've taken those off the table.
Well, he wasn't given the death penalty anyway, was he?
Oh, I believe so. And then
he was. And then they commuted it.
Yep.
Because of that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. There was one of the serial killers where they weren't given the death penalty because they agreed to take them to some bodies. And maybe it wasn't Ridgeway then.
I don't think.
This is crazy stuff.
You're wrong.
99.999999999% of Washingtonians understand that this is crazy stuff. Yet it gets to the point where it's having a hearing in Olympia. Well, how do we get here?
And if you're in jail for life, you don't need to be voting on stuff.
No,
a lot of the argument is that he wouldn't actually they'd be dismissed from the jury, blah, blah, blah. They'd get whatever. But the right to vote is key. They would definitely be able to vote given this bill. And that's just ridiculous. They're in jail for life. They're not going to get out and actually take part in the system that we're voting for.
And if you're not in jail for life, then remember, this has been a slow drip to this crazy point. They have already had laws to help restore some of the rights of convicted felons to vote when they get out of prison. Mm-hmm. So this is a slow drip, and it's like, okay, so we're doing this. And then you're just basically saying, I mean, you're trying to get to the point where if you are imprisoned, that's the only difference.
Yeah,
Like,
we're just
you
going to house you.
You were just going to house you for free and feed you for free. Or not even that, like, oh, you want to, the next bill, here it is. You guys, please send me what you think the next bill will be next year, and hyperbole is more than welcome. The next bill will be allowing Uber Eats drivers to deliver to state penitentiaries. Because you can't have them.
That's probably.
Oh, did I just give her
that's
an
pretty
idea?
good.
That's what it'll be. It'll be, the only difference is we're housing you. Everything else you could do on the outside, have visits, let your wife and kids come stay with you. Not even a conjugal visit, like they can come live in the prison too.
Right.
You can go out, you can go to movies. We'll have this in, we'll have that in. You can get Uber Eats delivered. I mean, that's where we're going to, right? If you don't think that they should have punishments beyond their actual sentence of incarceration, look, if you're going to let Gary Ridgway serve on a jury, then nothing is off limits. Genuinely, nothing is off limits.